The hydroponics bay smelled like wet soil and recycled air, which Owen had long ago decided was the scent of honest work. He adjusted the nutrient flow to the tomato beds, watching the readout stabilize on his datapad. Through the transparent dome overhead, Kesslith Station's double suns turned the sky into shades of amber and rust. "You're still here." Mara leaned against the doorframe, her maintenance coveralls stained with hydraulic fluid. "Third shift ended an hour ago." "Plants don't care about shifts." Owen didn't look up from the readout. "The phosphorus levels were off." "The phosphorus levels are always off. That's why we have automated systems." She walked closer, peering at his screen. "You know what I think? I think you stay late because a certain Velari diplomat walks past this bay on her way to the council chambers." Owen's jaw tightened. "Thessa Myron walks past everyone. It's a public corridor." Mara's grin was insufferable. "And you just happen to time your exit for when she passes, every single day." "Go fix something," Owen muttered, finally meeting her eyes. "Preferably far from here." Mara laughed and left, but her words lingered like pollen. Owen did time his departures. He'd been timing them for 3 years, ever since Thessa arrived on Kesslith as part of the Velari Integration Initiative. She'd stood in the council chamber and argued that human settlers deserved better housing allocations. Her long ears swept back with passion, her voice carrying conviction that made career politicians uncomfortable. He'd fallen in love with her during that speech and had been carefully managing the condition ever since. The door chimed. Owen looked up to find Thessa herself standing in the entrance, and his heart performed its usual betrayal, beating faster while his face remained perfectly neutral. "Owen Trade." She looked uncertain, which was unusual for her. "May I speak with you?" "Of course." He set down the datapad, hyper-aware that he was covered in nutrient solution and probably smelled like fertilizer. "Is something wrong with the food shipments?" "No, the shipments are fine." She stepped inside, her movements precise despite obvious distress. Her ears, usually held in confident angles, drooped slightly. "I need to discuss something personal." Owen's mind raced through terrible possibilities. "I'm listening." "My father has been removed from his position." Her voice stayed level through obvious effort. "There was an investigation into relief fund allocations. Mismanagement, they're calling it, possibly worse." "I heard rumors," Owen said carefully. The whole station had heard. Velari political scandals traveled fast. "The family is disgraced." "My marriage prospects," she stopped, composing herself. "I had arrangements, understandings with appropriate families. Those have been withdrawn." Owen waited, giving her space to continue. "I need stability," Thessa said. "Protection from those who might exploit my family's weakness. And you need help with agricultural contracts. I've seen you struggle with the council's bureaucracy." His heart was doing something complicated and painful. "What are you suggesting?" "A marriage of convenience." She met his eyes directly. "Political protection for me, administrative support for you. A practical arrangement between reasonable people." Owen should have said no. Should have protected himself from the exquisite torture of loving someone who saw him as a convenient solution. Instead, he heard himself say, "I'd be honored." Relief crossed her face. "Thank you, I'll have the contracts drawn up. We can keep this simple and professional." Professional, the word landed like a stone in his chest. "Of course." After she left, Owen stood alone among the tomato plants and let himself feel everything he'd never show her. The years of careful distance, the love he'd learned to carry quietly, the impossible hope that she might someday see him as more than useful. The phosphorus levels still needed adjusting. He returned to work because that's what he did. He solved problems, kept things growing, and loved Thessa Myron from a distance that would now, paradoxically, become much closer. Living with Thessa was an exercise in disciplined heartbreak. Owen learned her routines within days. She woke early, preferred tea over coffee, and read agricultural reports with the same intensity others reserved for entertainment. Their quarters were modest but comfortable, divided into clear territories. Her workspace, his workspace, shared common areas navigated with polite choreography. She never noticed that her tea appeared each morning at exactly the temperature she preferred, or that the lighting in her workspace was always adjusted to reduce the glare that bothered her eyes. "You're very considerate," she said one morning, reviewing trade contracts at the breakfast table, her long ears tilted forward in concentration. "Most humans I've worked with don't notice environmental preferences." "Just paying attention," Owen said, which was true. He'd been paying attention for 3 years. "Still, I appreciate it." She smiled briefly, already returning to her work. "This arrangement is working well." Arrangement. Owen poured himself coffee and reminded himself that working well was more than he'd ever expected. The first crack in Thessa's assumptions came during the second week, when Owen found her struggling with a jammed door panel to the storage bay. She was trying to force it manually, her face flushed with frustration. "Let me," Owen said, already pulling his repair kit from his belt. He'd started carrying it after noticing how often station maintenance ignored their sector. "I can manage," she insisted, but stepped aside. Owen removed the panel cover, identified the misaligned servo, and had it working within minutes. When he looked up, Thessa was watching him with an odd expression. "You're very skilled with repairs," she said slowly, "just basic maintenance." He replaced the cover. "Grew up on a station. You learn to fix things." "Where did you grow up?" Owen hesitated. "Outer settlements mostly, moved around." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. He'd grown up in military families, stations where basic maintenance meant combat engineering and emergency repairs under fire. But that life belonged to someone he'd stopped being when he came to Kesslith. Thessa nodded, apparently satisfied, and the moment passed. That night, she fell ill. Kesslith's native flora produced pollen that human systems ignored but Velari physiology treated as an aggressive toxin. Owen found her collapsed in her workspace, her breathing shallow, her skin flushed with fever. Panic tasted like copper. He carried her to her bed, his mind already running through medical protocols. Velari biology reacted differently to standard antihistamines. The wrong treatment could make things worse. He spent the night researching, cross-referencing medical databases, and finally contacting a Velari physician 2 systems away who walked him through the proper care. Owen monitored her temperature, adjusted her medication doses, and didn't sleep. When Thessa woke 36 hours later, weak but recovering, she found Owen asleep in the chair beside her bed, his datapad still showing medical charts. "You stayed," she said softly. He woke immediately. "How do you feel?" "Like I was poisoned by flowers." She tried to sit up. "How long was I?" "2 days, don't move too fast." He helped adjust her pillows, his hands gentle. "The doctor said you'll need another day of rest." "What doctor?" "Velari specialist. I contacted her through the Colonial Medical Network." He stood, suddenly aware he probably looked terrible. "I'll get you some water." "Owen." Her voice stopped him. "Thank you." He nodded and left before she could see his expression. The fear that had gripped him, the desperation to keep her safe, the love he couldn't name. In the kitchen, he leaned against the counter and let himself shake. Professional arrangement. He was doing a terrible job of maintaining that fiction. When he returned with water, Thessa was watching him with something new in her eyes. Not recognition, not yet, but the beginning of questions she hadn't thought to ask. The raiders came at dawn, which Owen's old training recognized as tactically sound. Kesslith Station ran on minimal security, relying on its remote location for protection. That assumption died with the first explosion at the supply depot. Alarms screamed through the quarters. Thessa was already moving, pulling on clothes with efficient speed. "What's happening?" "Raiders." Owen was checking his comm, reading tactical feeds. "They're hitting the depot. Evacuation protocols are initiating. We need to reach the shelters." She headed for the door. "Wait." Something in the feeds bothered him. The raider movements were too coordinated, too focused. "They're not just after supplies. Look at the pattern." Thessa pulled up her own display, her diplomatic training reading the data. They're pushing toward the Velari residential sections. They know where our technology is stored. They know where you are, Owen corrected, his voice flat. This is targeted. Her ears flattened against her head, fear response. We need to move. They joined the evacuation flow, but the crowd bottlenecked at the main corridor. Owen saw it immediately. Raiders had cut off the primary shelter route, forcing people into secondary passages. Standard herding tactics. He grabbed Thessa's hand. This way. That's the wrong direction. Trust me. Something in his voice made her follow. Owen led them through maintenance corridors he'd memorized during his first week on Kesslith, moving with certainty that had nothing to do with agriculture. Behind them, weapons fire echoed. How do you know these passages? Thessa asked, breathing hard. Studied the station layout, in case. In case someone tried to hurt you, he didn't add. They emerged near the outer agricultural domes, far from the evacuation routes. Owen was pulling up schematics, calculating paths, when Thessa grabbed his arm. There, 3 raiders moving toward their position. We're trapped. Stay behind me. Owen's voice changed, became something harder, more certain. Owen, you're a farmer. I'm whatever keeps you alive. He positioned himself between her and the raiders, and Thessa saw it clearly for the first time. The way he moved, the cold calculation in his eyes, the absolute lack of hesitation. This wasn't a humble agricultural worker. This was someone trained for violence. The raiders raised weapons. Owen moved. What happened next took seconds but felt frozen. Owen disarming the first raider with precision that spoke of muscle memory, using the captured weapon to suppress the others, creating space and cover while pushing Thessa toward safety. He fought like someone who'd done this professionally, and Thessa watched her careful assumptions about her convenient husband shatter like dropped glass. Station security arrived, driving the raiders back. In the aftermath, Owen checked Thessa for injuries with gentle hands that had just disabled 3 armed attackers. You're military, she said flatly. He didn't deny it. Was, past tense. For how long? 8 years, security forces. I left before coming here. Why? Owen met her eyes. Because I was tired of violence, wanted to grow things instead of destroying them. That's not the whole truth. Thessa's ears angled forward, the Velari equivalent of narrowed eyes. You've been watching me, protecting me. How long have you been doing that? Since you arrived on Kesslith. Why? The question hung between them like a live wire. Owen could lie, deflect, maintain the comfortable fiction. Instead, he chose truth, because someone needed to, and I was qualified. It wasn't a full confession, but it was closer than he'd ever come, and Thessa heard what he didn't say in the spaces between words. Thessa couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, while her mind reassembled 3 years of interactions with new context. The security officer who'd attended her first council session. The quiet man who always seemed to be leaving the hydroponics bay when she walked past. The convenient husband who knew exactly how she took her tea. In the morning, she found Owen in the kitchen, looking exhausted. We need to talk, she said. I know. He set down his coffee. What do you want to know? Everything, starting with why you proposed marriage. Owen's expression did something complicated. You needed help. I was available. That's the practical answer. I want the real one. Thessa, you've been protecting me for 3 years, she interrupted. You proposed marriage the moment I became vulnerable. You know things about me I've never told you, my tea preference, my reading habits, the temperature I'm comfortable in. That's not convenience. That's, she stopped, searching for the word. Love, Owen finished quietly. That's love. The word settled between them like gravity. I watched you argue for human housing rights in your first council meeting, Owen continued, his voice careful. You saw people, not politics. You were fierce and compassionate and so beautiful it hurt to look at you, and I thought, there's someone worth protecting. So I did, quietly, from a distance, because you deserve to make choices without someone's feelings complicating them. Thessa's ears were completely flat, overwhelmed. You loved me before proposing marriage. Before, during, still do. He managed a small smile. The marriage was selfish, honestly. Chance to be near you, even if you only saw me as useful. I feel incredibly stupid, Thessa said. You're not stupid, I hid it well. Why didn't you tell me? Because you married me for safety, not affection. Telling you would have made you uncomfortable in your own home. I wasn't going to do that. Owen stood, moving to the window. If you want to dissolve the arrangement now that you know, I understand. That's not, Thessa stopped, frustrated. I don't want to dissolve anything. I'm trying to understand how someone could love me that patiently. It wasn't hard. Owen turned to face her. You're easy to love, and patience is just hope stretched over time. Something cracked open in Thessa's chest. She thought about every small kindness, every solved problem, every moment of protection. He'd been loving her in the gaps between words, in actions she dismissed as consideration. What if I asked you to start over? She said slowly. Same marriage, different foundation, with honesty this time. Hope flickered across Owen's face, quickly controlled. What kind of honesty? The kind where I tell you I've been reassessing my feelings. Thessa crossed to stand in front of him. The kind where I admit that knowing you love me changes how I see everything you've done. The kind where I ask if you'd be willing to let me love you back. Owen's breath caught. You don't have to. I want to. She took his hand, the same way he'd grabbed hers during the raid. You've been choosing me for years. Let me choose you too. When Owen kissed her, it felt like honesty. Years of patience rewarded. Hope stretched over time finally allowed to snap back into something real and immediate. Thessa kissed him back and tasted all the words he'd never said, all the love he'd carefully hidden. I'm still angry you didn't tell me sooner, she murmured against his mouth. That's fair, Owen agreed, smiling. I'll make it up to you. How? However long it takes, I'm very patient. Thessa laughed, and Owen decided that sound was worth every silent year. Their marriage had started as a convenient arrangement, but love, patient, quiet, persistent love, had been building its foundation all along. Sometimes the strongest bonds were formed long before anyone acknowledged them. And sometimes, Thessa thought as Owen held her close, being chosen silently was the loudest declaration of all.